It's time to walk away quietly, Kayla. My mother's voice cut through the Sunday dinner chatter like a blade through butter. I looked up from my plate of mashed potatoes, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The dining room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My older brother Dean sat across from me, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that made my stomach turn. "What do you mean?" I asked, though some part of me already knew something terrible was coming. "The house is sold," my mother continued, her tone as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "We closed last week. The new owners move in next month." The fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the plate. "Sold? But I've been helping with the mortgage for 3 years. You said we were keeping it in the family." Dean's smirk widened. "Plans change, little sister." My mother sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're 27 now. You have your own apartment. It's time to move on." The room spun slightly. I'd sacrificed so much for this house, for this family. And they'd sold it without even telling me. I sat there in stunned silence as memories flooded back. 5 years ago, when Dad got sick with his heart condition, I'd been the one sitting in hospital waiting rooms at 3 in the morning. I was 22, fresh out of college with my teaching degree, planning to move to Portland for better opportunities. Instead, I'd stayed in our small Oregon town, taking a position at the local elementary school. "Someone needs to be here for Dad," Mom had said back then, her eyes pleading. "Dean has his business to run." Dean's contracting company. The one that barely turned a profit. The one I'd quietly lent him $5,000 to keep afloat 2 years ago. Money he'd never paid back. I remember taking extra tutoring jobs on weekends, forwarding hundreds of dollars each month to help with medical bills and mortgage payments. "We're family," Mom always said. "Family takes care of each other." Now I understood the truth. I wasn't family. I was their safety net. The responsible one they could count on to sacrifice everything while Dean lived his life and made his messes. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I need to get my things from my old room." "About that," Dean said, leaning back in his chair. "I've been using it for storage. My tools and supplies are in there now." "You what?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Mom held up a hand. "We packed a box for you. Just some keepsakes. Everything else was donated or thrown out. You haven't lived here in years, Kayla. We needed the space." She pointed to a cardboard box sitting by the front door. One box. 27 years of my life, reduced to one box. I walked over and looked inside. Random items. Old yearbooks, a chipped coffee mug, some childhood photos. Underneath everything, I noticed a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front made my breath catch. It was from my grandmother, who'd passed away when I was 15. "For Kayla when you're ready," it read. I grabbed the box without another word and walked out, their eyes boring into my back. I didn't open the envelope right away. I sat in my tiny studio apartment, staring at it for hours. My grandmother had been the only person in my family who'd ever truly seen me. She'd been a teacher too, passionate about education and helping kids who struggled. Finally, around midnight, I carefully opened it. The paper inside was crisp, the ink still bold and clear. "My dear Kayla," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've probably learned some hard truths about sacrifice. I learned them too, spending years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Your grandfather wasn't a bad man, but he took me for granted. Your father learned that pattern, I'm ashamed to say." My hands trembled as I continued reading. Strength isn't about how much you can carry for others. It's about knowing when to put the weight down. Never mistake sacrifice for love. Real love doesn't demand you become less so others can be more. Something small fell from the envelope. Key on a faded keychain. I recognized it immediately. It had hung in my grandmother's sewing room. "My name is Kayla Turner. I'm 27 years old, and I've spent the last 5 years of my life being the family safety net. I teach second grade at Riverside Elementary in our small Oregon town, about 40 minutes outside Eugene. My apartment is a studio above the hardware store on Main Street, 300 square feet of independence that I'd fought for when my family wanted me to move back home after college. The note attached to the key was brief. Old office, 412 Main Street. Second floor. It opens the next chapter. I recognized that building immediately. An old brick structure just 2 blocks from my apartment, mostly empty now. My grandmother had rented an office there decades ago, though I'd never known why. She'd passed away before I was old enough to ask about adult things. Monday morning I called in sick to work, something I never did. By 9 o'clock I stood outside 412 Main Street, key in hand. The building manager, an elderly man named Frank, looked surprised when I asked about the second floor. "Hasn't been anyone up there in years," he said. "Your grandmother prepaid the lease for 20 years. Still has 4 left on it." He led me upstairs. At the end of the hall, a door with frosted glass read, "Turner Learning Center. Draft plans." My heart pounded as I unlocked it. The room was filled with filing cabinets, a desk, and boxes labeled with dates from 15 years ago. Dust covered everything, but underneath I could see the careful organization. My grandmother had planned something here. I spent hours going through the boxes. Inside I found business plans, curriculum outlines, and letters to local education departments. She'd been planning to open a tutoring center for underprivileged kids in our town, a place where struggling students could get help they couldn't afford. "So many children fall through the cracks," one letter read. "Smart kids who just need someone to believe in them." There were budget sheets, volunteer lists, even architectural drawings for how to renovate the space. She'd put so much thought into this dream. Then she'd gotten sick, and it had all stopped. At the bottom of the last box, I found a folder labeled, "For Kayla." Inside was a letter dated just weeks before her death. "I know you'll find this someday. You have the heart for this work. Don't let anyone dim your light." Something shifted inside me. I used my savings to officially rent the space month to month once the prepaid lease expired. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a bathroom, but it was mine. My parents heard about it through the small-town gossip mill and called immediately. "What are you doing wasting money on that place?" Mom demanded over the phone. "You should be saving for your future." "I am," I said calmly. "Just not the future you planned for me." Dean called next, his tone mocking. "Playing teacher in a dusty old office. When are you going to grow up and stop these fantasies?" I hung up without responding. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of just holding everything together. I started small. Posted flyers at the library and community center offering free tutoring after school. The first week 3 kids showed up. The second week 7. By the end of the month, I had 15 students and 2 volunteer tutors. Mrs. Palmer, the retired English teacher, and Jonathan, the librarian who'd always encouraged my love of reading. 3 months in, someone unexpected walked through my door. Marcus Chen had been 2 years ahead of me in high school, captain of the debate team while I'd been the quiet girl who'd helped him study for calculus. Now he worked as a city planner. "Kayla Turner," he said, looking around the center with genuine interest. "I heard about what you're doing here. This is incredible." I felt my face warm. "It's small. Nothing special." "It's exactly special," he insisted. "Do you know about the community development grants the city offers? This is exactly the kind of project they want to fund." I hesitated. I'd never been good at asking for help, at putting myself forward. That was the old pattern. Stay quiet, stay small, don't make waves. But Marcus pulled out his phone. "Your grandmother's dream deserves to live, Kayla. Let me send you the application link. Just think about it." That night, I stayed up until 2 in the morning filling out the grant application. Every question asked me to explain why this mattered, what impact it would have. For once, I let myself dream big. 2 months later, a reporter from the local newspaper called. Somehow, she'd heard about the tutoring center and wanted to write a story. I almost said no. But Mrs. Palmer overheard and gave me a stern look. "Let people see the good you're doing," she said firmly. Stop hiding. The article ran on a Sunday. Teacher revives grandmother's dream. Free tutoring center serves local students. It included photos of the center, quotes from parents, and my grandmother's story. By Monday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Parents wanted to enroll their kids. Volunteers wanted to help. Local businesses offered donations. The story got shared on the town's Facebook page, then picked up by regional news sites. At the grocery store that week, strangers stopped me to say they'd read the article. "Your grandmother would be so proud," one elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. My mother called that night. Her voice was strange, a forced brightness I didn't trust. "We saw the article. How wonderful. We always knew you'd do something meaningful." The lie hung between us like smoke. Dean showed up unannounced on a Friday afternoon. He walked into the center while I was helping a fourth grader with fractions. His boots tracking mud across the floor I just cleaned. "We need to talk," he said loudly, interrupting the lesson. I asked Mrs. Palmer to take over and stepped outside with him. His face was red, his jaw tight. "You're making us look bad," he said without preamble. "Everyone in town is talking about you and your little charity project. Like you're some kind of saint." "I'm just helping kids, Dean." "You're showing off," he snapped. "And you need to publicly thank the family for supporting you. Tell people we helped you start this." I stared at him. "You want me to lie. I want you to remember where you came from. Family loyalty, Kayla. Or did you forget that when you decided to play hero? Something cold settled in my chest. You supported me by showing me exactly what not to become." His face went purple. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stormed back to his truck, tires squealing as he drove away. The following Tuesday, I arrived at the center to find the front window shattered. Glass littered the sidewalk. Someone had spray-painted "fraud" across the door. My stomach dropped. Frank, the building manager, was already there with the police. "Security cameras caught a truck," the officer said, showing me grainy footage on his phone. "Can't see the plate clearly, but it's a dark blue Chevy." Dean drove a dark blue Chevy. "Do you know anyone who'd do this?" the officer asked. I looked at the footage again. "No," I lied. I wasn't going to sink to his level. Word spread quickly. By that afternoon, volunteers showed up with cleaning supplies and plywood. Marcus arrived with paint. Mrs. Palmer organized a schedule for repainting. The whole town rallied around us. Someone started a fundraiser online for security cameras and repairs. Within 2 days, we'd raised $3,000. Twice what we needed. The extra money went toward new computers for the students. Dean had tried to tear us down. Instead, he'd united the whole community behind us. 3 weeks later, I received an email that changed everything. The community development grant I'd applied for had been approved. $15,000 to expand the tutoring center, purchase materials, and hire part-time staff. I read the email 3 times before it felt real. At the bottom, there was a note. "Your proposal was chosen over 12 other applicants for its clarity, community impact, and sustainable vision." Marcus called minutes later. "Did you see? You got it." "I got it," I repeated, still stunned. "There's something else you should know," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. "Dean's company applied for the same grant. For a youth construction training program." My heart stopped. And he didn't get it. His proposal had financial inconsistencies and no real plan. Yours had heart and transparency. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. This would make things worse with my family, and I knew it. That night, my mother called. "We need to talk about this grant situation. Dean is devastated. The city clearly has favorites." "It's not about favorites, Mom. It's about having a solid plan. You could give him some of that money. Share it. That's what family does." I hung up without responding. The dinner invitation came 2 weeks later. "We want to reconcile," my mother's text read. "Please come Sunday. Family should stick together." I almost didn't go. But some small, hopeful part of me wondered if they'd actually changed. Maybe the grant had shown them I was serious about this work. Maybe they were ready to support me for real. I should have known better. The meal was tense from the start. Small talk about weather and neighbors. Then, during dessert, my father cleared his throat. He looked exhausted, older than his 59 years. "Your mother and I think you should help Dean's company," he said. "Maybe some kind of partnership. Use your grant to give his business good publicity." There it was. The real reason for the invitation. "The grant is designated for the tutoring center," I said carefully. "I can't use it for anything else." "But you could mention his company in your materials," Mom pressed. "Say he helped renovate the space or something. It would boost his reputation." "That would be lying." Mom's face hardened. "You owe this family, Kayla." Something inside me snapped. Not into anger but into perfect crystalline clarity. I set down my fork and looked at each of them in turn. My father, who'd let me sacrifice my 20s to help the family while Dean coasted. My mother, who'd taught me that love meant erasure. Dean, who'd taken and never once said thank you. "No," I said quietly. "I've paid in full." The words hung in the air. My mother's mouth opened, closed. Dean started to speak, but I stood up, picking up my purse. "I've spent years trying to earn something you were never going to give. But I'm done. The center is doing well. The kids are thriving. And I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be." I walked to the door, then paused. "I hope someday you'll be proud of me for the right reasons. But I'm not waiting anymore." The drive home felt different. Lighter. The weight I'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. Whatever happened next, I was free. At home, I opened my laptop and started planning. The grant money would let us expand. We could serve twice as many students, offer more subjects, maybe even start a weekend program. For the first time, I wasn't planning for them. I was planning for me. And it felt incredible. Over the next 6 months, the center transformed. We expanded into the vacant office next door. I hired 2 part-time tutors with education degrees. Local businesses donated laptops. Students' grades improved dramatically. 14 kids who'd been failing were now passing their classes. Parents sent thank you notes that I pinned to the bulletin board. "You believed in my son when no one else did. My daughter actually wants to do homework now. You've changed our lives." Meanwhile, through the town gossip network, I heard about Dean's struggles. His company faced lawsuits from clients claiming shoddy work. The city had fined him for cutting corners on a community project. He'd had to lay off his only 2 employees. My father's health declined under the stress. He had another heart episode and spent a week in the hospital. The bills must have been crushing. Their insurance was basic at best. One night, I did something I couldn't quite explain. I called the hospital billing department from a blocked number and paid off his entire balance. $5,000. It wiped out most of my personal savings, but I couldn't let him suffer, even after everything. "Mark it anonymous," I told the billing clerk. A nurse accidentally revealed my secret 2 months later. My mother had been arguing about payment plans at the front desk, and the nurse, trying to be helpful, mentioned that Miss Turner already took care of it. The call came that evening. My mother's voice shook with something between rage and confusion. "Why did you pay your father's hospital bills? To humiliate us? To prove you're better than we are?" "I didn't do it for you," I said calmly. "I did it for him." "We don't need your charity," she spat. "It wasn't charity. It was closure. I'm not doing it again." She hung up. 3 days later, she appeared at the center during business hours, walking in while I was teaching a group of 6th graders about fractions. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, until I asked Mrs. Palmer to take over. Outside, she unleashed months of frustration. "You've destroyed this family's reputation. Everyone thinks we're terrible parents because you're so perfect now." "I never said anything bad about you," I replied. "I've only talked about the center and the kids. Your success is an insult to us." I realized then that nothing I did would ever be right. Failing would prove I needed them. Succeeding proved I didn't. Either way they'd find fault. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said and went back inside. The city council meeting in March changed everything. They announced plans to build a new community center on the plot where my family's old house had stood. The property had been sold to a developer, who'd then sold it to the city for public use. Marcus, who sat on the planning committee, called me afterward. They want to name it after your grandmother. The Turner Community Learning Center. It'll have classrooms, a library, computer labs, everything you've been doing but bigger. On that land? I asked, the irony not lost on me. On that land. And Kayla, they want you to oversee the educational programming. It would be a paid position. Director of Community Education. I sat down hard. The house my parents had sold, the place they'd pushed me out of, would become the foundation for my grandmother's dream. The universe had a strange sense of poetry. There's a public hearing next month, Marcus continued. You'd need to present your vision to the council. I'll do it, I said without hesitation. The news spread fast. My parents heard about it within hours. Dean called, screaming about how I'd stolen their land, even though they'd sold it willingly. My mother sent a long text about family betrayal. I blocked both their numbers. The public hearing was packed. I presented my vision for the new center. Free tutoring, adult education classes, technology training, a safe space for kids after school. I showed data from our current center. Improved grades, increased confidence, families transformed. The council asked questions. I answered clearly, confidently. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. The vote is unanimous, the council president announced. Project approved. Miss Turner, welcome aboard. In the crowd, I spotted my mother sitting in the back row. Her face was unreadable. After the meeting, she intercepted me in the parking lot. Can we talk? Really talk? I hesitated, then agreed. We sat in her car, engine off, silence stretching between us. I read your presentation materials, she said finally. The statistics, the testimonials. You've helped a lot of kids. That's the goal. She twisted her hands in her lap. I need to ask you something. Dean's company is failing. He's losing everything. Could you transfer some of that funding to him? Just to help him stay afloat. As a family. And there it was. The mask slipping. Not genuine interest. Just another manipulation. I opened the car door. Goodbye, Mom. I didn't hear from them for weeks. Then Dean's business partner, a man named Victor, reached out to me. We met at a coffee shop downtown. I need you to know something, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Dean forged client signatures on contracts. He billed for materials he never bought. I found out last month and quit. But I kept copies of everything. The documents were damning. Dean had been running a scam for 2 years. Why are you telling me? Because it's going to come out. The state licensing board is investigating. When it does, it'll hit the news. Your last name is Turner too. I thought you should be prepared. The story broke 3 days later. Local news picked it up. Contractor faces fraud charges. Dean's photo appeared on the evening broadcast. My phone exploded with messages from concerned friends. But the strange thing was, nobody connected me to his crimes. Instead, the news stories mentioned me separately. In contrast to her brother's legal troubles, Kayla Turner has become a pillar of the community through her educational non-profit work. My integrity stood on its own. I hadn't accused him. I'd simply lived differently. Dean lost everything. His company dissolved. His truck was repossessed. He moved back in with our parents, now 42 years old and living in his childhood bedroom. My father, weak from his ongoing heart condition, sent me a letter. His handwriting was shaky, the words honest in a way I'd never seen from him. I see now what I failed to see before. You've always been the strong one. Not because you carried our weight, but because you knew when to put it down. I was wrong to let your mother and brother treat you like a safety net. I'm proud of who you've become. Cried reading it. Not from joy, it was too late for that, but from grief for what could have been. I visited him in the hospital the next week. He looked frail, oxygen tubes in his nose. We talked for an hour about nothing important. At the end he squeezed my hand. "Teach your mother what real love looks like," he whispered. I never could. 3 days later he passed away. I paid for the funeral. My mother didn't thank me. The community center broke ground in June. I stood with Marcus and the mayor, turning dirt with a ceremonial shovel while photographers captured the moment. The building would take 8 months to complete. Dean showed up drunk at the ceremony, shouting about how I'd stolen everything from him. Security escorted him away. My mother stood at the edge of the crowd, watching silently. That night she called. "Dean has nowhere to go. The bank foreclosed on his apartment. He's been living in his car." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not sorry enough to fix it, but sorry it had come to this. "Can't you help him? Find him a job through your center." "The center serves students, Mom, not family members who need to face consequences." "You've become so cold." "No, I've become clear." By fall, Dean's situation had worsened. He'd been arrested for drunk driving. My mother called me from the police station, begging me to post bail. I declined. He spent the night in jail. The town watched it all unfold. Some people judged me harshly. How could I let my family suffer? But most understood. They'd seen me sacrifice for years. They knew the story. The grand opening of the Turner Community Learning Center happened on a crisp October morning. 500 people attended. The building gleamed with fresh paint and new windows. Inside, classrooms waited for students, computers hummed in the lab, books lined the library shelves. My grandmother's photo hung in the lobby with a plaque. Visionary, educator, believer in second chances. I gave a speech about community education and the power of one person's dream. When I finished, the crowd applauded. I looked out at the faces, former students, parents, volunteers, city officials, and felt overwhelming gratitude. In the back, almost hidden, stood my mother and Dean. They looked small, diminished. Dean's face was gaunt, his clothes wrinkled. My mother's hair had gone completely gray. After the ceremony, as guests toured the building, my mother approached me. She moved slowly, as if every step hurt. "We need to talk to you," she said quietly. I gestured to a quiet corner. Dean followed us, eyes down. "We don't have anywhere to live," my mother said, her voice cracking. "The bank took the house Dean was renting. We're staying at a motel, but we can't afford it much longer." Dean spoke for the first time. "I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your help. But Mom hasn't done anything wrong." I looked at them, these people who'd shaped my life in such painful ways. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just sadness for the family we could have been. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 brochures. "These are applications for the community housing program. It's income-based rent. The waiting list is usually long, but I can make sure your applications are processed fairly." My mother's face crumpled. "You're treating us like strangers." "You asked me to walk away quietly," I said gently. I did. But I walked toward something better. This is what I built. These are the resources available to everyone in this community, including you. "But we're your family," Dean said desperately. "Family isn't about blood," I replied. "It's about showing up, supporting each other. You taught me that, by showing me what it looks like when family doesn't do those things." I handed them the brochures. "The housing office opens Monday. If you need help filling out the forms, Mrs. Palmer volunteers there on Wednesdays." My mother stared at the papers like they were written in another language. "You're really not going to help us." I just did. "But I'm not going to save you. That's not my job anymore." I walked back to the reception, leaving them standing there. It wasn't cruel. It was necessary. They needed to learn what I'd learned. That real strength comes from standing on your own. As I rejoined the celebration, Marcus caught my eye and smiled. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. The holidays came and went. I sent my mother and Dean a simple card. Wishing you peace. No money. No invitation to visit. Just acknowledgement that we shared history, nothing more. In January, I received a voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded different. Quieter, less demanding. We got into the housing program. It's a small apartment, but it's clean and safe. Dean found work at a warehouse. It's not much, but it's honest. I wanted you to know. Not to thank you. I know you don't want that. Just to tell you we're okay. I saved the message but didn't call back. Some distances were meant to stay. The tutoring center thrived. We served 200 students that year. 15 kids who'd been held back a grade caught up. 20 got into advanced classes. 3 earned full scholarships to college. Their success stories filled the walls, a gallery of what was possible when someone believed in you. I started dating Marcus in February. Nothing serious at first, just coffee and long walks where we talked about everything. He understood me in ways I'd never experienced. He celebrated my independence instead of trying to diminish it. My apartment felt less empty. My calendar filled with purpose, not obligation. I slept well at night, no longer carrying the weight of other people's choices. 1 year after the center opened, we held an anniversary celebration. Former students spoke about how tutoring had changed their trajectories. Parents shared tearful testimonials. The mayor announced expanded funding for the program. I stood at the podium for closing remarks. Outside the windows, I could see the town I'd grown up in, the streets I'd walked as a child dreaming of being someone who mattered. My grandmother left me a letter telling me that strength isn't about how much you can carry for others. It's about knowing when to put the weight down. 4 years, I carried my family's expectations, their failures, their demands. I thought that was love. The room was silent, everyone listening. But love isn't about making yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. Real love celebrates your growth. It doesn't ask you to dim your light. It brings candles. I paused, emotion tightening my throat. My parents once told me to walk away quietly. I did walk away. But not the way they expected. I walked toward my own worth. Toward purpose. Toward a life built on respect instead of obligation. After the ceremony, I drove to the cemetery where my grandmother was buried. I placed flowers on her grave. Bright yellow daisies, her favorite. I did it, I whispered. Your dream came true. And I found myself in the process. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and pink. I walked back to my car, unlocked it, and sat for a moment, watching the light fade into dusk. They'd asked me to disappear quietly. Instead, I'd bloomed loudly, brilliantly, unapologetically. Not through revenge, but through becoming exactly who I was always meant to be. I started the engine and drove home, the road ahead clear and entirely mine.